Hey there, let's do a vintage knife face-off. Wenger versus Victorinox. I just happen to have two very similar vintage knives, a Wenger and a Victorinox, both approximately somewhere from the 1950s, both with the exposed rivets, exposed awl, and bail. And they have the same tool set. So while I had them both, I thought this would be a great opportunity to do a side-by-side. So let's just see how they stack up. Wenger's over here and Victorinox is over here. First of all, just on the size, the Wenger actually is a 93 millimeter knife, whereas the Victorinox is a 91 millimeter knife. But surprisingly, the Wenger weighs just a little less than the Victorinox. When I weighed this out, it was 63 grams. That's about 2.2 ounces. And when I weighed out the Victorinox, it was 64 grams, or about 2.3 ounces. So I would say on the size, that's just kind of a toss-up. But on the scales, when you look at the Wenger scales, they've got a certain color. It's a little different than the Victorinox scales. I would describe the Victorinox as being a little darker red, maybe a little more maroon. The Wenger scales have more of a flat surface. They've got a nice curve, but they're more of a flat surface, whereas you can see the Victorinox knife kind of has a very slight radius all the way across, a little more cheek to that scale. So I think I'd have to give it to Victorinox for the look of the scales. And one other thing, and this really doesn't factor in, but I'll just say I found the Victorinox scales easier to work with restoring. They seem to take a better shine than the Wenger scales do. All right, so what else here on the outside? How about rivets? The Wenger's got these really cool bird's eye rivets. And so I think those look cool, but I have seen a lot of vintage Wengers where that outer piece is missing. And you just see kind of a hole with the pin in it. So I think I'm going to have to give it to Victorinox there for durability on the pins. Now, as far as the shield, I think that clearly goes to Wenger. Just number one for the cool factor. You've got this great shape with the crossbow. It's very important in Swiss history, and the word Swiss in French, it's just so cool looking. Those usually have like a black or red background. I think black on this style mostly. It just kind of wears away, but it leaves this really cool, like hammered or pebbled finish. The Victorinox, this is nice. At this age knife, that's a nickel silver inlay. It's a little thicker than today's, but they do have the tendency to pop out. I'm sure you've seen them with the outside or the inside of that missing. So I think the Wengers are a little more durable as well. So I think that's a clear win for Wenger there. Now on the bail, that's another interesting vintage feature. I'm going to say that's a toss-up because they are both very decorative. They're both nickel silver, I believe. They have a little different shape. The Wenger's a little more rounded. The Victorinox is kind of rounded but has a little bit of a point. So I don't think one way or the other there you can say one's a clear winner over the other. All right, so let's look at some of the tools. Let's start with the Wenger's main blade. And let me get these out here. So yeah, just comparing the blades. And this is not a real fair comparison because on this specific Wenger, this blade is a little bit short. Came to me a little short and reprofiled. I cleaned that up a little bit and resharpened it. But you can see that they're about the same length, and the Wenger blade back during this time was a little bit thinner, didn't quite have the belly that the Victorinox one has. Also, one thing I've noticed is that just the tang is much bigger. And the nail nick is much bigger on the Victorinox. So I would say that would have to go to Victorinox. Okay, let's take a look at the small blade on the Wenger. The thing I like about Wenger small blades, the shape is cool, but they have a tag stamp as well. So that's a nice feature. Wenger, Switzerland. It's just a nice little feature. Victorinox, They never have a tang stamp on the small blade. Oops, getting turned around. There we go. But it does have a more of a belly, and I think because of that, it's probably going to wear better over time. About the similar reach. So I don't know, maybe that's a toss-up. That's a toss-up. So let's look at the screwdriver and the cap lifter. Now on the Wenger, on these bigger ones, the 93 millimeter ones, oftentimes you had a cap lifter and then an extended portion here on the screwdriver that incorporated the wire stripper. So for just retro coolness, that goes to Wenger. But honestly, for functionality, the Victorinox is probably better. I was surprised it has the same reach. This one looks a lot longer, but when you put them up to each other, honestly, they have about the same reach, which was surprising to me. I will say that the Wenger looks a little heavier, a little beefier. That's good. But the Victorinox had the wire stripper just built right into the cap lifter. Plus it had this wire bender or stripper right here. So I don't know, just for vintage looks, let's go with the Wenger on that. But for functionality, maybe the Victorinox. And then let's see, what else we got? We got can openers. Again, for retro coolness, the Wenger. Wenger used this style can opener for a long time. Victorinox gave that up in, what, 1946? And by the time the 50s rolled around, Victorinox had this new patented can opener. It honestly works a whole lot better than something like this. So again, for functionality, but for something you don't see very often and it's just really cool and lets you know you're looking at a vintage knife, I like the Wengers. Okay, back tools. And I'll just say this right now. The Wenger really wins on the back tools. Let's take a look at the Corkscrew. How much beefier it is than the Victorinox. It's a little bit longer as well. And that's important when you're trying to pull a cork out of a bottle of wine. A lot of times it's easy to bend a corkscrew if you don't do it right. So the thicker the better. Now the Wenger has just 4 turns and it is grooved. It does have a decorative groove. The Victorinox went with 5 turns. It's just a little more dainty looking, I guess. The liners are about the same. Victorinox kind of put a dull or matte finish on their liners, aluminum liners, where you can see Wenger's has a little more shine to it. Thickness and everything else about the same. And then finally, what do we got left? The awl. Awl is a clear winner to Wenger. Look at this, the size difference. Look at the reach difference. Both of them are really sharp and pointy, but I got to give it to Wenger on that. It's just a bigger tool, the bigger reach. Big is good. All right, so that's a rundown through 2 very similar vintage knives from the 50s, Wenger versus Victorinox. Who's the clear winner? Well, I'm not going to step into that, right? But who do you think's the winner? Why don't you let me know what you think in the comments. This video's been a mess, so thanks for watching it, and have fun collecting.